are here with us in person for the sermon and solemn prayers, or whether you're joining us on the live stream or later for the sermon and solemn prayers. We're glad to have you with us today. We begin on this Good Friday with the sermon that is one of just so many ways that Good Friday is just not quite like all other days. Most years, the pain of Good Friday comes as a surprise, even though we know it's coming, even though we've been here before. At least for me, even each year, I think maybe it won't be a surprise this year, but every year somehow it manages to catch me off guard, like a child that I know is hiding behind a door and yet still manages to startle me when they actually jump out at me. Maybe it shouldn't be such a surprise. But some lessons are hard to learn, especially when it comes to teaching our hearts. Good Friday can be painful partly because it can remind us of all that our hearts have suffered already by opening themselves to love. It can remind us of all that we are afraid we might lose by loving again. It can bring up old pain and make it feel new. It can bring up new fears we didn't even know we had. Loved ones who have died for whom we still mourn. Jobs we have lost and still want back. Friends who have betrayed us and not been forgiven. Anger we have fed and nurtured as it grows. Fears we have repressed and not conquered. Anything we haven't finished with, anything we haven't faced yet, we are confronted with in the shadow of the cross. Here, we cannot hide anything. But Good Friday is not finally about our loss, or really quite about us at all. It's about what God has done and is doing and will do again, about this unique event that spans all of history. In that, Jesus hangs entirely alone on the cross. Neither we nor God can quite touch him here. He is alone. And it is out of that aloneness, out of that suffering, that our gain comes. The final word belongs to love, not to pain. And that's where we re-enter the scene, not writhing or self-flagellating, but asking what's next, despite the very real possibility that what's next will try to break us too. I think it's important to pause here and take note of the important difference between forgiving from the cross and hopping down from the cross to invite Pilate and the temple police out for a round of beers on me. Love without bounds is not the same as love without boundaries. The love without bounds that Jesus offers from the cross and asks us to offer as we follow him means a love from which no one is excluded. A love that says that nothing in our past can render us ineligible for love today. That's different from a love without boundaries, which says that no behavior is excluded. In fact, Jesus shows a remarkable ability to model boundaried love in the midst of even torture in the story of his passion, the story that we have just walked through the stations and will soon read here. Jesus offers paradise to the convicted man who asks only to be remembered, but doesn't spend his last breaths trying to talk the man on his other side into accepting grace. He stands before Pilate and Caiaphas, grounded in his own identity and in his own body, and doesn't allow them to provoke him into cursing them. He doesn't blast them from the spot, as he probably could have. He also doesn't spend his energy trying to convince them of something that they really aren't there to engage honestly. He holds himself close enough to be able to see and connect with what's really happening, from that distance, he can engage with compassion for the women he meets, for his mother and the beloved disciple, for the confused crowd, and even for his accusers. But he holds himself also distant enough that he doesn't disappear into their need. He doesn't offer to become whatever they want him to be. He quietly remains himself. Though it would be anachronistic to say that Jesus had a particular attention in the moment of the kind of boundaries that we talk about and understand today, Jesus' choices in these final moments are a model class in the kind of loving boundaries that researchers Brene Brown and Prentice Hemphill tell us turn out to be the only way, really, to live out a love that is honest, true, and lasting. A love without bounds requires some boundaries, which Hemphill defines as the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Prentice Hemphill, whom many of us know about because of their work with Brene Brown, is a therapist, researcher, organizer, activist, founder of the Embodiment Institute, where they work to create resources for both individual healing and collective healing, out of the understanding that the individual and the communal cannot be divorced and cannot be identical. They're working to help all of us create a larger change that, in their words, is cellular as well as institutional, is personal and intimate, is collective as well as cultural, making love synonymous with justice. They themselves are most affiliated with the Buddhist tradition of spirituality, but their work resonates deeply with what Jesus came to do, how Jesus ended up on the cross, and why Jesus' death continues to be such a compelling core element of what it means for us to love God and our neighbor. And that work of turning the world upside down to build a better one, of healing our whole community, begins with boundaries, not to protect us from love, but to make it possible for us to love fully. In their words, boundaries give us the space to do the work of loving ourselves. They might be actually the first and fundamental expression of love. They give us also the space to love and witness others as they are, even those who have hurt us. We can make ourselves a kind of island where no one can penetrate our defenses. We can turn and walk away from the cross completely. But when we do, we lose life's sweetest offerings as well as the pain. We become like dead people walking. We can make ourselves a doormat where we have no defenses to penetrate. But when we do, we lose life itself and become swallowed by the need around us. We are then like ghosts, half here and half not, and no longer able to be of much service to anyone. Or we can be, as Jesus hoped, wise as serpents and innocent as doves. We can prepare ourselves to lose and to hurt, not as the goal of love, but as a price we are willing and actively choosing to pay for the depth and joy of loving. The sainted late Bishop Barbara Harris, the first woman and first black woman to be ordained a bishop in the Episcopal Church, was known in her diocese for saying that, quote, "Our individual crosses are the burdens we choose to carry for Jesus, and we always have a choice in it. If someone puts the burden on you without your consent, it isn't your cross, it's oppression." Sometimes a thing can be more than one thing at a time, but without our consent, it isn't our cross. And yet when the choice is before us, we find that the more that we make this choice, the more opportunities we have to love, the more we are blessed by that loving, and the more like Jesus we become. In the shadow of the cross, we can choose that wiser innocence. We can reclaim a new innocence, one that acknowledges it's likely that loving will hurt us again, but chooses to chance it anyway because we have faith that the hurt isn't the final word. Love is. Love that is bigger than pain, bigger than loss, bigger even than death. Death is very real, and so is pain, but love is bigger. God says to us today that it is worth loving anyway, even when everything points to death and hopelessness, even when our hands reach out and all we can touch is empty air. Jesus' love led him to his cross, to suffer for us and finally to descend to the dead. Love incarnate gave us his best and asks ours too. Our best may require of us one major and conclusive moment, or it may not. But certainly it will ask of us a consistent, lifelong effort. When Jesus told his disciples on Maundy Thursday, "I give you a new commandment. Love others as I have loved you," it wasn't just for that one day or one day a year. Love asks our best every day, every moment, which is exactly what makes it hard. The best of us is not just what we can do in one moment, and often is not public heroism or martyrdom, though it may be, in the last 2 years have reminded us of the value of both. The best of us is simply our best behavior toward each other and God, not in the sense of our most polite or least standing out, but in the sense of our most loving behavior, as a determined habit. The best of us asks us to bear up under the pain of risking love and yet do our very best not to cause pain or be indifferent to others, no matter how we have been hurt ourselves. For at the end of it all, our best love knows that there is in each of us a little of Judas, a little of Caiaphas, a little of Pilate. It reminds us of this not to keep us down or to make us feel ashamed, but so that when others around us act a little too much like Judas, a little too much like Caiaphas, a little too much like Pilate, we can be prepared to meet them with forgiveness and not condemnation, just as Jesus today forgives and does not condemn even those who crucify him, as Jesus forgives and does not condemn even us. My favorite Jesuit author once wrote, "God, the church I love is sinful, as am I, so it's a good place for me. Help your church and me be signs of your love." For my part, I can think of no better prayer to be on our hearts as we stand in the shadow of the cross. May we indeed be signs of God's surprising, complicated, never-failing love. Amen.
Amen.